Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and good evening, afternoon everyone. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Sharifah Zahra and I'll be your moderator for today's conference. So if I believe all except Dr. Mariam Kamel is yet to enter the room. So if we may start our conference today.
Yes. Yes, sir. அங்க அம்மா ஏசி போட்டுருக்காங்க போய் படம் சரி சார் அதான் சொல்றேன்
It's okay. I'm muted now.
Okay, so let's start our conference today, I believe. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Our panel, all the way from Germany, our audience, Prof. Tamim, Prof. Dawood, Dr. Fatme, and all the students that are involved in this today's conference. So, as I believe, our three panels are all here. So today we'll be discussing and talking about the Muslim minorities in Germany, about their lives, their practices, how they live their lives there as a minority group of people. So before we start, I would like to remind all the audience, the students, the guests, to turn off your microphone. So if you have any questions, please keep it to yourself until we open the floor for Q&A questions at the end of the session. So, without further ado, we would like to invite Professor Dr. Dawood as the Director of International Institute of Muslim Unity to give his speech. Prof, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Sister Sharifa. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Our honorable speakers, our respected participant, on behalf of the International Institute for Muslim Unity, I would like to welcome you all and to thank you also for responding promptly and eagerly to participate in this conference, which to us is very important for many reasons. First, there is a lack of information and sharing of information as well among all of us. We are here in Southeast Asia, but our university is hosting students from more than 120 countries. More than 25% of our university population from different Muslim countries. And part of our education for our student is that to acquaint them with the Muslim situation everywhere. Our university was established back in 1983. And Alhamdulillah, more than 90,000 students graduated from our university. Our students who graduated from our university are in almost in every country of the Muslim world, and even from minority Muslim countries as well. So, Alhamdulillah, that brother Dr. Fatmir was very instrumental in organizing this conference, because he had a very good contact with brother and sister in Germany. And Alhamdulillah, he managed to get very outstanding scholars whom we can learn from them. So today is a learning session for all of us, our academic staff, our students, and some also international brothers and sisters who are following our YouTube channel. As we know, the Muslims in Germany have been there for a long time, particularly who came from Turkey and neighboring countries, who are representing more than maybe 50% of the Muslim over there. But also they were followed, particularly recently, people from Arab countries, the Middle East, Africa, and other countries as well. So one of the aspects of this phenomenon is that people or Muslims, they came from different countries, nationalities, cultures, habits, and sometimes even Islamic sects, although most of them are of Sunni tradition. We are very concerned about the current situation of the Muslim in Germany today, because part of our belief that the Muslims are one ummah. We are concerned about their future. So by creating awareness among the Muslims about our brother and sister in Germany become a necessity. And living together in the host country, who willingly accepted the Muslim to coexist with them and integrate with them and engage with them and work with them to develop Germany as equal citizens, then maybe we have to look at this kind of things from that perspective. Because Muslims now become citizens of Germany and they have to contribute to the development of the country. However, we listen from time to time about the problems and challenges facing the Muslim in Germany, but also in Europe in general. I myself lived around 10 years in UK, and I could understand even the shift about the perception of the British towards the Muslim over there. Muslims have to live in harmony, peace, and mutual respect, whatever they are, because their religion commands them to be like this. This is the basic ethics and akhlaq of the Muslims, wherever they are. They have to be part and parcel of that particular society, but at the same time keeping their identity and deen. And that is the commandment of Allah, that no compulsion in religion. We have to live together in harmony and having our own culture, Islamic culture, and adhering to our deen, which enhance and strengthen the coexistence with other religions. I don't want to dwell about this kind of thing because I'm sure we are in the position of learning today. I want just to thank our brothers who are with us today, and we will listen to them actively, what they can share with us and enlighten us with the current situation of the Muslim there, maybe their history and also their future. Thank you very much. And we are welcoming and we are honored to have you today. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Dawud, for the speech. Very beautiful. What I can say, wherever we are, wherever we live, we must live in a perfect, harmonious way. Okay, that's it. Okay, so now let's go to our first speaker today, which is Mr. Sulaiman Will. I'm sorry if I pronounce it badly or wrongly. So, Mr. Sulaiman studied history, philosophy, German studies, and education for several semesters, and he then became the editor-in-chief for the Islamized
Islamic Times. It's easier.
Okay, Islamic newspaper, which is a monthly media newspaper communication project for the Muslims in Germany for over 20 years. So he often regularly gives lectures on Islam in Europe and the discourse within the Muslim community. So without further ado, Mr. Sulaiman, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah bless this gathering and give everybody success, and also may Allah bless the Muslims in Malaysia, who have, I think, a far more bigger and important contribution to play in my eyes, especially for Muslims in the West, than they currently do, at least in the perception of the global Muslim community. Because I think they offer solutions, or at least approaches and different discourses, which, let's say, the so-called core of the Muslim world doesn't do in the present time. I think that is quite important to mention. And also I can say from our experiences, we always very benefited from meeting them in several occasions inside Malaysia or other. I don't want to be too theoretical, because I'm pretty sure that Mr. Rieger will cover those points. I don't want to, let's say, take some of his talking points away, or Sister Mariam, or Brother Ahmed. So I will limit myself more to, let's say, to some biographical notes on our newspaper. So in order to understand, let's say, some aspects, some facets of the issue, to understand where we come from. Islamische Zeitung is, let's say, for other Western circumstances, has a rather unusual beginning. Let's put it like this. In 1995, a group of a dozen young unmarried Muslims, couple of families, decided that they wanted to live and work together much more closely than in the usual bourgeois circumstances we are all in now. So we wanted to go to a place where this would be possible. And since West Germany at those days was already very fixed and very structured, we thought of East Germany, because East Germany was in a way for Muslims or for Islamic activities a very unplowed field. There were hardly any Muslim communities, a couple of businessmen, several thousand students, some people who lived there from communist times and stayed, like Syrian or Libyan doctors. So, but it was not really a big issue. But also we wanted to go to a meaningful place, so we went to Weimar. And I don't know what the equivalent of Weimar is in terms of Malaysian culture. It might be Malacca, but Weimar is the core of German culture. It was a pinnacle in its classical time, was starting with Herder, Goethe, Schiller, having another flowering in the late 19th century, early 20th century with the Bauhaus movement. So there was very, very important people living there, working from there. It was a microcosmos of German culture, a very important place, symbolized by the you could say the co-geniuses Goethe and Schiller, who lived there, the two most famous German poets and authors of all times. And it wasn't just these two people, but also they represented for us, and still do, I think we still stick to this analysis, that they offer a way of communicating to Muslims and non-Muslims that being a Muslim and living in Europe is not a contradiction. See, that following Rasul Sallam and adhere to the demands of Allah is not an opposition to European culture, as it is presented today on a global scale, you see, by non-Muslims and Muslims as well. I mean, it's a both-sided fallacy. It's not just a fallacy by so-called Islam critics, but it's also a fallacy of Muslims. And I think people like Dr. Fatmir know from their own national biography that Islam in Europe was a reality for first time when the Arabs came to the gates of the Caucasus in Dagestan, and when the Sahaba went to Cyprus, and when Tariq bin Ziyad went to Andalus. You see, you had always Muslim presence in Europe, and the great Professor Dr. Fayed Muish coined the phrase of a Muslim half moon, which starting from the Iberian Peninsula, ending up on the northern shores of the Volga basin. So, and this half moon is not just in the geography, but also in time too. So, and for us, Weimar was a place where we need to go, and it was a symbol that we need to claim as Muslims, because at that time, Islam was basically seen as a religion of expatriates working and living and earning their wages in Germany, you see. And quite consciously shows, because many Muslims then always had it in the back in their mind to go back. So that was a conscious decision. We went there. We opened a large, I mean, from the size, a large Muslim center. We had over the years many conferences. For example, we're the first Muslims in Europe who established something like bringing all the Muslims from the Balkans and Eastern Europe and the Caucasus together. We had European Muslim summits, but also at a certain point we decided that we needed to have a media transmission tool to talk to non-Muslims. You see, because when you talk to people personally, you have a limited amount. So we decided to found what is called Islamische Zeitung, Islamic Times in English. And although for many years we tried to change the name, because a newspaper really can't be Islamic. It's a bit of a terminological fallacy, because just you buy it, you read it, it doesn't have any claim to the name, but that's what it is. We founded it. We started with no funds, with big technical obstacles, because producing print work in those days was a much different process than it's now. You see, you had like 16 steps from your own computer to the printed product was a large thing, and we couldn't do it regularly because we always had to get the money together. But we started it with vigor, with energy, which we still try to transmit today. And in a certain way, you could say Islamische Zeitung is a bit in a counter factual or counter narrative to the title of those conferences, because we never saw ourselves as a minority. You see, we were not all of us were German, not all of us were of European descent. We were quite multicultural and still are, but we never had an understanding of being a minority. In fact, we always refused this minority-majority discourse, because it's one of those traps like the term culture. We also refuse to accept Islam being a culture. It's not a culture, it's a filter for culture. It takes out what is reprehensible and it strengthens and perfects what's permissible. And that's why Muslim daily life in Bosnia looks different than Muslim daily life in Cotabato or in Mogadishu. You see, that's we really refuse this term. And also, I think over the years we also have to come, because going back to the introduction of Professor Dowd, I think it's very difficult, at least in these discourses, to speak about a kind of a unified Muslim perspective in terms of global sense, because no human being lives globally. You have your locally, you have your, I mean, we have unifying elements of being Muslims, of meeting in Mecca, Medina, or following basically the same social and spiritual life patterns. That's no doubt. But as I've, for example, realized in the issue of the Ukraine war, many Muslims in, I don't know what happened now, but there are many Muslims from other parts of the world who really cannot grasp the effects or the scope of what is now going on in Europe, because they have their own perspective, which is fine. But I came a bit to doubt these claims of universality, not in terms of religion and deen, but in terms of how people see the world and how they act in it. Nevertheless, we founded the newspaper. We started it. It took us a couple of years to produce the first 20 issues. Very, very slow. Then in the late 90s, we realized that Weimar is a very wonderful place. I'm sorry, excuse me. Weimar is a wonderful place, but it's also quite far off from the other Muslims. So but we still didn't want to lose the the closeness to Eastern Germany, because Eastern Germany was in those days quite unimaginable today, but it was not a place where you had a general enmity towards Islam and towards Muslims. The first reaction in the 90s people had, you see, after nearly more than 40 years experience of state socialism and being part of the Eastern Bloc, was basically, so you're Muslim, so what do you bring me? You see, it was a different perspective than today, where you have a quite toxic mixture of old-time racism and anti-Muslim resentment. But that was a different time, so we wanted to stay there. And so we moved to a place called Potsdam, which is, let's say, opposite the river of Berlin. So in Berlin, you have a large Muslim community, but Potsdam is still in only an hour's drive, but still in East Germany, and in a very beautiful place, which was the residential town of the Prussian King Frederick the Great. So it's a very remarkable park. We had close to the entrance a wonderful center, and had for 10 years a thriving community hosted there. And we professionalized our newspapers in the late 90s, early 2000s. We started to publish on a monthly basis. We went to Berlin, opened an office there close to the government center. And then some years afterwards, we left Berlin, moved to different parts of Germany, because nowadays you're not really, especially when you have limited means, you don't need a big static office. You basically can produce a newspaper or any kind of media from your laptop. So let's say we reduced our physical presence in terms of offices. But this is a short story how Islamische Zeitung developed. We opened different media channels. We have distributed over German-speaking Europe. We have a video channel. We're working on other platforms, so we try to get with the times, try to stay up to date with modern technology. But the core issues for us haven't changed so much. I mean, it's still the most important for us is to invite people to Allah, which is a more precise term than to say to invite them to Islam, to invite people to Allah, to give them good, solid information from a balanced middle way position. I mean, we were the first. I mean, we really traditionally we anti-extremism. I mean, we wrote about people like Bin Laden in the late 90s when no one knew in Germany who Bin Laden was. We refuse sectarian extremism, so we try to be on the middle way. People get quite good information. We have an enormously large archive with articles going back to the early 2000s. That's the one thing. Then, of course, also part of our work is that we try to reduce the amount of misunderstandings, of prejudices, of attacks also on Muslims, on Muslims, but also on the Deen. Defend the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There is another issue now. A third issue is that we want to familiarize Muslims with important discourses from the, let's say, wider community, from the wider world. These are issues like ecology, which is climate change. We were the first to introduce that into the Muslim discourses. Economical justice, globalization. What is the consequence of technology? What does technology do with us? These issues, to bring them into the Muslim community, but also, which is also quite important, for example, which is not done by people who see themselves as a minority in an existential way. We also try to convey Muslim discourses and possible or potential solutions from our own traditions, from our own teachings, to the wider world. So, for example, we had a large, and still in some ways still have, we had a large financial crisis in 2008, and we picked it up and we worked about Muslim answers of it, and I don't mean Islamic banking. We worked about answers to it. Everybody in Malaysia knows what a financial crisis does to the country, given the events in the late 1990s. So that's what, for example, was an issue. We do other things, asking questions. Some editions ago, we had an issue about loneliness and what does loneliness does to people. And it's a large issue in the Western societies. The UN even speaks about an epidemic of loneliness. So we try to convey these discourses from the Muslim community into the wider society. And the fifth aspect is we try to bridge the gaps inside of the different Muslim communities. I mean, in Germany, as in most Western European and American countries, many Muslim communities, in brackets, if they are not organized along ideological lines, because ideological movements, they have less ethnic separation, but most Muslim communities are still and foremost organized according to ethnic lines or national lines, you see. So you have Turkish Muslims, and you have within the Turks, you have hiding the Kurdish Muslims, but they're not the same. You have the Arab Muslims, you have North African Muslims, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you all know that. And for a very long time, especially when we started, and even up to the early 2000s, was still very much the every discourse, every communication, every intra-Muslim communication was very much structured according to these ethnic lines. See, in our eyes, and not just in ours, but also in the upcoming Muslim generations who came up to the 2000s. I mean, more and more young people realize that that is not working, because they don't have this. Really nearly ontological split of identity between coming from this country and living in this country. But a lot of young Muslims, active and dynamic, and academically well-versed Muslims, they see themselves as being Muslims, but nevertheless being Germans or French or Europeans. And that is actually not even a very modern thing. If you go to statements of Ibn Arabi, who says Arab is who speaks Arabic, you see, it was a different way of understanding being in a community in those days. And many young people want this, and we picked it. And also we put it into the Muslim communities that it's probably not a good way for the future to still organize according to ethnic line or to live and act by ethnic lines. And that's a function for us. We are bridging these gaps. See, we are informing different communities and the members of different communities what the other is doing, you see, to get to a more, let's say, a more unified, unifying is a bit of an difficult terms, but to get a bit more wider approach that they see Muslim identity does not need to be bound to specific ethnical or cultural parameters as it has been in the past decades in Germany. And then harking back to the title, Muslim minorities, we think it is also very important. Obviously, demographically, sociologically, Muslims are a minority in Germany, as they are in most Western European countries, but not though in certain cities. You see, also depends a bit of what is your perspective. If you look on the map, let's say, of Germany, Muslims are a minority, but if you go to places like Berlin, and you go to places like Duisburg and Cologne and Frankfurt, you have quarters where Muslims are either nearly a majority or even a majority. You see, it depends also on the perspective of how you look on it. You see, so you cannot even say in absolute and total terms that Muslims are a minority. So, but still, even though one has to accept the reality of it, I think one still also has to question the discourse of minority as such, because it entails certain concepts and certain terminologies which are, I don't say impossible or wrong, but which need to be questioned. Let's put it like this, which need to be questioned, and also they lead to certain consequences of intra-Muslim discourses and of Muslim thinking. You see, because what follows from if you perceive yourself as being a minority, you see, because if you see it from a Rouhani or an Imam perspective, you could say, no, we are not a minority. We are those who have been honored by Allah to worship Him and to convey His message if we can do it. You see, it's also a matter of how you look at it. You see, it also has to do that we are in Germany, and I think in all the Western Muslim communities, we have a total and horrible mix of identity issues and of immigration issues and of citizen issues and of Muslim issues. They're completely mixed, you see, completely mixed. And if you see what is coming since the past 10 years, especially from America, from people like Linda Sahu and other people, you see, this is basically a postmodern left discourse, which has been put on top, let's say, of a Muslim perspective, and which makes it very, very difficult to disentangle it, you see, and to separate the different issues and to say, well, look, okay, you may be discriminated as a POC, but are you necessarily discriminated because you're Muslims? I think that is also quite important. I don't want to go too much into the theoretical part because I think the others will speak about it more to it than I will do. This is our approach also, you see, to accept the let's say the material, the quantifiable realities, but also to go beyond them, you see, to go beyond them, to transcend them and see what can we do, because there's another reality is, and I think that goes for Germany, but also other places, is currently there is no Muslim subject in Germany. You see, politically speaking, the Muslims in Germany are not a subject. You see, there is no mobilizable, there is no energizable mass of people which could be described as a subject, you see. You have different communities and they have the possibility of intra-communal subjectivity and of mobilization, but that does not go for, let's say, the wider Muslim communities in Europe. And given the fact that present day representational structures who claim to be representatives of Muslims are not necessarily doing much to counteract. This is also a bit of part of those platforms like Islamische Zeitung. There are others, but not many, I have to say also. You say, don't say that because we are the best or we're the most wonderful. No, we are not. We have a lot of difficulties in our daily work. And I'm 51, you see, I'm getting very gray. You see, if you see, I've just opened up my picture archive because my daughters just on the weekend want to sort out all the family photos, you see, and I showed them some photos, you see, when we started the newspaper and all my hair was red, and now it's obviously not anymore. So it's also times have changed, but nevertheless, Islamische Zeitung is filling in this aspect a very important gap, because we enable a vertical and a horizontal intra-Muslim communication, which is very important. But also we try to, one of the problems of, let's say, the global Muslim community or the global Western community, especially those academic elites, is there is hardly any editorial process. You see, there's a very much a kind of a postmodern-like subjectivity. You see, especially when the communication is done by bloggers and vloggers and influencers. There is no filtering process where you can say, well, is this issue relevant or not? Or is another issue more relevant? Or are they priorities in the Muslim community? For example, also we are in a certain way unorthodox because we always refused to accept that the hijab discourse is an important issue for Muslims in Europe. And we still do. So it's not even for Muslim women the most important issue from European Muslim women in Europe. You see, it has been put into the Muslim discourse by certain political groups, namely the Brotherhood, into the European Muslim discourse, and it hasn't helped the Muslims at all, because what basically has happened, the Muslim man pushed the woman in the front and say, you put on the hijab and you take all the problems, and they just could go on with their bourgeois life, and it hasn't helped the community. Let's put it like this. So discourses have also has also confluences, so consequences. Not just you see in an academic play and we write papers, but the way we communicate and the way we mobilize and the way we do campaigns has also direct influences on the situation of living Muslims. So that's so put it like this, that is, I think, what we can contribute, you see, to vitalize this. And also, I would also like to add as an addendum before I close, also the previous discourses of minorities and of minority and majority, and being in the minority has always dominated to a very large extent by an immigrant perspective. These people who came new to Europe or whose parents came new to Europe, and they're basically dominating the discourse, and not, ironically, you see, while claiming more minority rights in the wider community, have basically, for a large extent, there are exceptions. I grant you the English-speaking world is a bit different. There you have a lot of non-immigrant speakers and let's say people like Ingrid Metzen, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Imam Zaid Shakir. In America, it's different because you have 35% block of Afro-American Muslims. You see, they don't have an immigrant mentality. But in Western Europe, you see, the minority discourse has been driven. These people always have had or at least until very lately had an immigrant identity. You see, and that is in a way a bit of problematic, because there came with a lot of baggage. There's a lot of also half or only partially analyzed baggage, and didn't include the experience, for example, of converts like us, or I think Ahmed will speak about. Sorry, Brother Eckert will speak about also about the historical and experiential horizon of indigenous European Muslim communities as well. They have been excluded from these inner Muslim discourses, or from the discourses between Muslim and the wider society. And I think that's also one of the issues we take up and we try to change the discourse on this. I'm sorry it hasn't been a very cogent or coherent presentation, but I think it's very important that you get a glimpse into those different issues from our side. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Mr. Saraiman. Thank you for the sharing about the history, the discourse, what the papers are doing about the minority in order to communicate and educate, mobilize Muslim communities from different parts of the world. So I think it's a good sharing. So I would like to remind all the audience to don't forget to fill out the form, and if you have any questions, please type in the chat box, and then we can discuss it at the end of the session. So next, let's move to our next speakers, our next panel, Mr. Abu Bakar Rijal, who is a lawyer, a writer, and a publisher. So Mr. Abu Bakar is a practicing lawyer. I'm sorry, he is a practicing lawyer and a publisher for the German Muslim papers for over 25 years, and he also the founder for the European Muslim Union. Mr. Abu Bakar is a lawyer and a co-founder for the German weekly newspaper, and he is the chairman for the European Muslim Union, which he co-founded in 2005. So without further ado, Mr. Abu Bakar Rijal, you may take the floor. The floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning to everybody. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Dr. Fatmir and Professor Dr. Daud for organizing this wonderful event. Ironically, today in our center, there's no heating system, so I'm slightly freezing, and watching Professor Daud's background let me think on wonderful times in Malaysia. I mean, see the waves and the palm trees and your smile. And so I'm very, very ready to visit Malaysia again.
Welcome.
To my own background, I mean, it was already introduced. I became Muslim in the year 1989. So that was the time where Germany was reunifying, East and West came together. And just to indicate some change of atmosphere, I remember when I became Muslim and I visited my friends again in the Black Forest, as a part of southwest of Germany, where I'm from. I mean, all my friends responded to the fact that I became Muslim like, wow, I mean, this is strange. Like, this is really an odd decision. I mean, in a funny way, you were put in the corner of being strange or a kind of like slightly out of touch of things and so on. While when I see people converting to Islam after 11th of September, in fact, I mean, the atmosphere has changed, and now this is received as something maybe even dangerous. So you see that indicates already a tremendous change in the last 30 years now. Before I want to introduce some thoughts about the situation of Muslims in Germany, I want to basically give you a quote of a philosopher which I admire quite a bit. Is called Byul Jun Han. I don't know if you've heard about him. He's a Korean philosopher who went to Germany some years ago. I mean, he learned perfect German, and he's now one of the most successful German philosophers, in fact. And I want to take one quote of him from one of his recent books called Infocracy, because I want that you keep that in mind to understand maybe what I try to say in the next couple of minutes. So the quote is, "The end of the grand narratives that ushered in postmodernism is completed in the information society. Stories break down into information. Information is the opposite of narrative. Big data is opposed to the grand narrative. Big data tells nothing." So this is a quote which I think is relevant for the understanding what I try to basically present to you now. I mean, why is that important? Because of course we live in a time of information. I mean, Byul Jun Han calls it infocracy. where there's a lot of information going around about the situation and the presence of Muslims in Europe. I think that indicates that it is time now for us, and that's why I appreciate this event, to tell the whole story of the Muslims of Europe and also the whole story of Islam, which you cannot reduce just to information. So, for instance, if you think on the debate about the so-called European or German Islam, which lots of people talk about now, I think you have to slow down a bit and ask first a very fundamental question, which is very shocking in its simplicity. And the question is, what is Islam? What is Islam? In fact, when I give talks to young Muslims or sometimes also to non-Muslims, I sometimes raise the question in the beginning of my talk, I mean, please tell me what is Islam? And you get an amazing variety of definitions, of tries of definition, because it's in fact a quite complicated question. Because is it a religion? Is it a nomos? Is it a state religion? Is it ideology maybe? I mean, there's so many possible answers on that. So we should not forget to ask the fundamental question, what is Islam? Now, if you want to get an answer on this question, you can go back to an hadith of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because as you know, because it's quite a famous hadith, when he was asked about Islam, what is Islam? In fact, he answered, Islam is Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So that in itself indicates, I mean, if you want to understand Islam, you have to talk about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And what does you need to understand this fundamental question is that somebody tells you the whole narrative of Islam. And this is not just a couple of information. This is a quite long, complicated, and very kind of wide question. Also, by the way, just in brackets, I mean, because this question about our identity as Muslims in Europe, so maybe a positive or negative identity, depending on the observer, this whole phenomenology of Islam, Iman, Ihsan also indicates a paradox, which I found always interesting. Because from one point of view, to be a Muslim, for instance, to apply Islamic law, for instance, you need an identity, you need an I. Yeah. I am a Muslim and I do, for instance, a trade contract. So you need, of course, an identity. But if you think on Ihsan, which you could also say is the whole world of Tasawwuf, I mean, the whole spiritual world of Islam, I mean, there's no identity. So, for instance, if you think on the prayer, or if you think on going on Hajj, or doing spiritual exercise and so on, I mean, the aim is to destroy, to lose your identity. So that I think you have to keep in mind to understand the balance of having an identity and at the same time of having no identity. To give you a practical example, I mean, when I went on Hajj, I think that was the first time in 1993, and I was circling around the house of Allah, I mean, I was not circling in terms of being a German Muslim. I mean, you lose your identity in that place. And in fact, you are gathered with so many other Muslims that in fact that you are an European, an Asian, an African, an American Muslim, I mean, it does not really matter in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is, I think, important to keep in mind. So the whole debate about the Muslims in Europe today is very much politicized, in fact. And so we discuss a lot about the role of political Islam, and also sometimes we raise the question, do we as European Muslims or as German Muslims practice our deen in a more conservative way or more liberal way? I mean, in the light of Islam, Iman, Ihsan, it does not really make full sense to me. I mean, you can hardly pray, for instance, in a conservative or liberal manner. I mean, you cannot go on Hajj in a conservative or liberal manner. It's more about to do your practice correct. And I would say we as European or German Muslims, I mean, in fact, we try to be as much as possible correct in our deen. And at that same time, of course, we are part of the wider, if you want to call it, Muslim Ummah. But at the same time, of course, it is important that we are German Muslims, European Muslims, because the way how we are and the way how we are, let's say, cultivated in the places we live, I mean, brings in an aspect into the whole Muslim society of the world, which I think is in fact of key importance. And there's no question that, for instance, in terms of culture, I mean, in my own case, quite obviously, I mean, we are basically part of the European culture. We are part of the European societies, and also we think like Europeans sometimes, and that is an enormously important contribution to the Muslims all over the world. Generally, I believe, because I just raised this whole problem, I would say, of politicizing Islam quite a lot. I mean, we have to remind people, in fact, on the fact that Islam is more than just politics. In fact, if you study Islam a bit more intensively, you will realize Islam is much more about economy and psychology in a way than about politics, in fact. So I think we have to basically turn the whole debate about Islam upside down, because in my understanding, the role of politics in Islam is in effect not that important in comparison to the role of economy and psychology in Islam. So we try to change slightly the debate about political Islam into the question, is there economical or psychological Islam? I think that is of very big importance, in fact. So if you ask, for instance, the question which is sometimes raised in the media, I mean, is Islam part of Europe, or is Islam part of Germany? I would ironically answer no, because yes, there are many millions of Muslims in Europe, but is Islam part of Europe? In a sense, no, because there is no marketplaces, there's no Akaf, normally at least. There's lots of institutions of Islam missing. So the whole concept, what Islam is, in a sense, I think we should slightly change. So this famous German or European Muslims is a quite wide range of people. In fact, I mean, you can see there are German Muslims like me who converted to Islam, obviously, but there's also a lot of Muslims from different parts of Europe. I mean, some parts of Europe like Andalusia, Sicily, or parts of Russia, I mean, been Muslim countries for centuries. I mean, there are so-called Muslims with immigrant background, but you know, sometimes, I mean, living here now in the third, fourth, or fifth generation even. And I think that all these people, all these groups of different Muslims form what I would call the German Muslims. So for me, the main issue here is really the question of language. I mean, because we are not talking about European or German Muslims, we are not following any kind of racial concept. In fact, for us, language is of key importance. So we follow, in that sense, the famous statement of Sheikh Ibn al-Arabi, who lived in the 12th century, who stated, man's essence is his ability to speak. In other words, from my point of view, I mean, if you speak German, you are German. I mean, if you speak a European language, you are European. So for me, the formation of this idea of European or German Muslims is in fact mainly based, in my understanding, in language. So whoever speaks a European language and has good intentions also being in Europe, for me is a European. So that we very clearly reject the idea of some right-wing philosophers in Europe or politicians who claim still, as nothing would have happened, that basically the whole idea of being a German or European is in any way linked to your race. So I want to introduce to you today a kind of practice which we perform here in Germany, which I think is of quite a bit of importance, and you may realize why. And this is that we invite since many years, and Mr. Suleiman has already pointed to that fact, that we invite since many years young Muslims, but also youngsters with any other background, to the town of Weimar. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the geography of Germany. I mean, Weimar is 2.5 hours away from Berlin. It's a very amazing town. I mean, it has 70,000 inhabitants, and it's one of the most beautiful towns I've ever been, in fact. And I lived there for 5 years in the 90s, and I'm still missing Weimar. I'm still coming back to it because it is a very extraordinary place. One reason is if you walk through the town, I mean, you see different phenomena of German histories. You will find the Schiller and the Goethe house. I mean, high points of European civilization. I mean, if you enter the house, you enter a complete other kind of world. I mean, very fascinating. And then you see the National Theater where, you know, the famous Weimar Constitution was presented. I mean, you see all kinds of traces of ideology is really of the past of Germany. You will find a building from communist time, but unfortunately, you will also find places of the times of National Socialism in Germany. So one of the most moving places, in fact, is the main square of Weimar in front of the National Theater. And you see in distance, you see a mountain called Ettersberg. And you have to realize, in fact, we tell also the young people, Muslims, this part of history of Germany, that on this hill there was Buchenwald, one of the most awful concentration camps of Germany in the time of National Socialism. Now, ironically, and just to hint, one of the tragedies of German history also is, I mean, there is a quote of Goethe himself, our famous national poet, where he was describing a kind of picnic situation with a friend of him called Eckermann. And they were doing a picnic on a mountain, in fact, on the mountain of Ettersberg. And Goethe was like very passionate and said, well, I mean, I will, with the help of Schiller and you, Eckermann, we will raise the German spirit to the highest. And ironically, the place he was saying that is exactly where we have now a museum, which is the Buchenwald Museum, which is in fact this ex-concentration camp of the Nazis. So that shows the tragedy also of German history. Now, as already mentioned, I mean, Weimar is famous because of the so-called Deutsche Klassik, German classics, which is the manifestation of the tremendous and very interesting and fascinating friendship of Schiller and Goethe. So this friendship time between Goethe and Schiller was from 1789 to 1805, and is now linked to this idea of German classics because it was a very kind of amazing relationship, in fact. So one of the German professors of literature, Mr. Borchmeier, defined this German classics in the following way, quote, in the face of this friendship alliance between Goethe and Schiller, Weimar classicism represents an attempt to establish an art form based on antiquity and the tradition of humanistic poetics against the form-dissolving tendencies of the period of revolution. So again, we have here this idea of the German classic to keep the narrative from the Greek philosophy over the German classics to the future. That was the main idea of the German classics. So, and this process obviously was also interrupted. Now, why is Goethe so important for us? I mean, if I want to advise to you a very wonderful biography about Goethe from a German philosopher called Rüdiger Safranski. I mean, he wrote a very wonderful biography of Goethe called The Art of Life. And Safranski was a very kind of tremendous intellectual in Germany. It took him 6 years, I mean, to write a biography, which indicates how complex these works of Goethe are. I mean, he had to go through 30,000 pages of writing of Goethe. I mean, 15,000 pages of it were Goethe's letters and so on. So it took him 6 years to somehow conclude this whole world of Goethe. And just also as another aspect, I mean, Goethe used in his time a vocabulary of 93,000 words. This is quite enormous. And if you compare that to Schiller and Shakespeare, for instance, they use something like around 30,000 words. So Goethe is tremendously complex, and he's also tremendously interesting. And now, I mean, Goethe lived also a time that brings me again back to Byul-Chun Han, where Goethe felt himself already there's an interruption going on in the narrative of Europe. And Goethe was very much aware of this. And just to indicate the atmosphere Goethe was experiencing in his time, I just give you another quote. It's from a letter of Goethe where he describes his time. And he says there, just as it is hardly possible to suppress the steam and smoke of locomotives, so is it hardly possible to suppress such things in the realm of moral and ethical. The liveliness of trade, the noisy rush of paper money, the swelling of the debt in order to pay off other debts, all these are monstrous elements to which a young man is today exposed. So quite interesting. I mean, Goethe obviously represents tremendous changes in the world of technology. I mean, he mentions, for instance, finance technology, in fact, but also the whole atmosphere, the whole dynamism of economy and the life-changing process is very hard, and in fact changes also the whole perspectives of young people. So this is one of the reasons why we bring young Muslims to the town, really to show there is a narrative in Germany, and there's a narrative in the world, and there's a narrative of Islam and the Muslim world, and we try somehow to bring that together and to create a deeper understanding of the situations we are in. And just before I end my contribution, obviously I'm running out of time, but I just want to mark 4 elements which this conversation between Muslims and Goethe is very, very interesting. The first element is religion. I mean, and in fact, when I went in the 90s to Weimar, being a young Muslim, I was very thrilled to realize that Goethe came quite close to Islam. And in fact, in his whole life, Goethe was reading Quran. I mean, he was very interested in the whole philosophy of Islam. He was reading Muslim poets. And so in his whole life, Goethe was somehow attracted by Islam. And just to give you one element of this interest of Goethe in Islam, which is quite fascinating, like in 1813, I mean, Goethe was watching that the Russian allies of Germany going against Napoleon came to Weimar, and he realized some of the soldiers were Muslims, and in fact he invited them to use a room in a school in Weimar to practice Jummah. Very typical for Goethe. He was not just very abstract thinking about Islam, he also wants to see how Muslims perform the Jummah and how they pray. So Goethe was very interested in all that. In 1818, in fact, he wrote a whole book in a sense about Islam called East-Western Divan, which is one of the most known pieces of poetry in Germany. And in fact, there are quotes of Goethe himself, like, "I do not reject the idea that I'm a Muslim myself." So this was, for me as a young Muslim, all very thrilling. Yeah, I mean, our national poet came close to Islam, amazing. I mean, he was interested in Islam in a time where everybody in Europe hated Islam, amazing. I mean, Goethe was, in a sense, not just trying to find out, let's say, the informations about Islam, he also wanted to know the narrative of Islam. I found very thrilling. But now, from today's perspective, being also a bit older, it's even other subjects of Goethe, I think, are in a sense even more relevant somehow. And I will tell you why. And that's the other 3 points we try to introduce into debate between Germany and Islam, but also between Germans and Muslims. So another important point is Goethe's approach of politics. I mean, you may have heard that Goethe was very radically opposing nationalism. And in fact, he calls nationalism as the lowest level of culture. So Goethe was already in his time realizing this turn towards nationalism is really dangerous. It destroys human civilization, and it destroys also the narrative of Europe. So Goethe was rejecting completely the idea of nationalism. Important today, because as you may see, many of the young Muslims have a strong tendency to again embrace some form of identity politics, up to the point of some kind of nationalism, even if you think, for instance, on Turkish immigrants. Then another important point we want to introduce to young German Muslims is also Goethe did not like the whole idea of ideologies. So, for instance, one very famous quote of Goethe is the following. Goethe, quote, "Every great idea appears tyrannical as soon as it manifests. Therefore, the benefit that it brings transform themselves all too soon into disadvantages." So Goethe was very, very skeptical against any form of ideology. He was skeptical about nationalism. And in fact, he was even skeptical to the whole phenomenology of revolutions, because he was believing more in evolution rather than a revolution. So in that sense, Goethe reduces the idea or the importance of politics as such. And I think we introduced that to Muslims, also showing in Weimar what may happen if ideologies appear, as you see quite well in Weimar. I mean, if thinking on communism and National Socialism, this whole threat of ideologies, I think, is very present in Weimar. And of course, we as Muslims, we have to be careful to be not politicized in the sense that our whole deen and religious belief turns into ideology. This is one of the key messages to the Muslims. Then another aspect, just to name a few, is his whole approach of natural sciences. Goethe was very proud on his you know, kind of contribution to the scientific world also. He was not just a writer. I mean, he was very much also a scientist. And one of his key beliefs in the world of science was that we have to reject slightly all this kind of technological instruments for the purpose of experiential knowledge, which somehow changes our relation between observation and reflection. So he was very skeptical of some of the techniques to discover the world. In fact, he was more interested in everything what you can grasp in a more central way. So this would be in itself a talk. So I can just shorten it very much down, but just to give you an example, a practical example. If you would, as Muslims, if you would ask Goethe, in brackets, if you would ask Goethe, should we go on a hill and sight and do the moon sighting by presence and by seeing the moon? Or should we go on our computers and calculate where the moon is in the very moment? I think Goethe would advise us to be much more concentrate on our central capacities rather than our abstract capacities. So this is a whole world in itself. I mean, to talk about Goethe's approach on natural sciences and how he received the world and how he observed the world. Another very important part in the whole world of Goethe, and this is the last one I want to mention here because we are running out of time, is this whole idea of technology, especially about finance technology. I mean, you may have heard about the most famous book Goethe has written, which is called Faust. And it's the whole world of Faust. I mean, it's the two volumes where Goethe expresses basically his whole worldview. And a very complicated book. I mean, I was reading it myself 5 or 6 times, in fact, and I'm still exploring new things in it. And I was not fully able yet to receive the whole narrative of the book in that sense, because it's so overwhelming. And so always when you open the book, you find new things and so on. But one aspect in the Faust is that Goethe was very skeptical about what could be called finance technology. So one of the characters in the book is a very kind of evil character called Mephisto. And in one of the situations of the Faust in the whole book, I mean, Mephisto is basically introducing the idea of paper money. So there is a duke, and Mephisto advises him to use paper money to become extremely powerful. And Goethe describes, in fact, an aspect of globalization, which I think is of key importance, which is the innovation of paper money. So Goethe was basically foreseeing, and we are here in the 19th century, that this possibility to create money out of nothing is a tremendous means of power. And Goethe was very skeptical about it, and he has basically foreseeing aspect of globalization, which is quite extraordinary if you think on the time he was living, which is the 19th century. In fact, he even wrote in 1793, which is quite early if you think about it, he in fact wrote an expertise for the Duke of Weimar, where he stated that money is not money merely by an official stamp, but rather by its own intrinsic value. So Goethe was basically pointing out that money is not just paper you put a stamp on, and you claim this is somehow backed, for instance, by resources. He claims that money is really money in itself when it has an intrinsic value. So Goethe was, in that sense, more believing in gold and silver. So I can only present that as one of the ideas of Goethe, but you see again a kind of debate about the significance of Goethe if you think on, for instance, the whole issue of zakat. I mean, that you have to pay zakat in which form? You have to pay it by paper money or by gold or silver and so on. This is a whole fascinating world. Just to come to an end and to conclude, I think when we want to understand Islam in Europe, we have to tell people the whole narrative of Islam. If we want to understand the situation and the presence of Muslims of Europe, we have to tell the stories of Al-Andalus, of Sicily, of the Balkans, of Russia, and Mr. Ahmed Krausen is doing an amazing job in that field. And I think if we want to contribute as Muslims in Germany, I think we have to think what are the questions of Germany, and we have to give answers as Muslims. And that's why I think this whole world of Goethe is very significant, because if you think on the main question which Goethe has raised, which is what about politics, what about natural sciences, What about economy? Goethe basically presents questions we as German Muslims have to put in our answers. If we have answers. If we have answers, they must come from our own sources, the Quran, Hadith, all our sciences. And that would create, in my understanding, a very interesting debate between Islam and Europe. Because, I mean, in the end of the day, people want to have answers, and Islam has to give answers, and it has to be on an intellectual level that people understand that Islam is, in a sense, quite fascinating. So to come to an end, I want to invite you all to join us in some of our tours through Weimar. I can tell you I have brought with Suleiman and others, I mean, over the last 30 years, I think we have brought a couple of thousand Muslims to the town and showed them the town, walk through the town. And you must be aware, I mean, that have been professors, business people, students, I mean, workers, simple workers. And I can tell you, and it's quite interesting to me, I mean, I have thousands of people who went to the town. I have not seen one man or woman who said this is not fascinating. I mean, all the Muslims have appreciated the town. All the Muslims have seen the significance of Goethe and Schiller. All the Muslims have seen the threat of ideologies there. All the Muslims have ended in a kind of positive way, thinking to link the high points of German civilization to, I hope, a very positive future. And so I want to invite you all to share with us this experience and to understand and learn more about the situation of Muslims in Germany. Thank you very much. And sorry to be, no, I have been more or less in time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abu Bakar. So previously, Mr. Abu Bakar said about the tour to Weimar. It's a very interesting town. So I hope all of us will get the opportunity to have a tour to that town and learn more about the Muslim in Germany, those wonderful towns. All right.
Thank you.
So, okay, nice. Without wasting any time, so we have the next speaker, which is Dr. Mariam. But sadly, to inform all you guys that Dr. Mariam cannot attend our conference today due to her own situation, her own problems, so I think so. And then we may proceed straightly to Mr. Ahmed Eket, which is who is a photographer. So Mr. Ahmed will talk about the Muslim and mosque in Germany. So Mr. Ahmed is a freelance photographer. So he has this photographic project about Islam in Europe. So the aim of this project, Islam in Europe, is to show the diversity of Islamic expression and how Islam is interpreted in the physical space by the European Muslims. So this work was successfully displayed across Europe as well as some Muslim countries, and he also published a coffee table book on the same theme of Islamic architecture in the Europe. So without wasting any time, let's invite Mr. Ahmad to present his talk, present his topic. So Mr. Ahmad, the floor is all yours. You may proceed.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. I understood it is my turn.
Yes.
And Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I have prepared some pictures and I hope I can find out. Oh, confusion. No.
Maybe it's better to stop sharing and you share again. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
It is good, yeah. Can you see my pictures?
Yes, yes.
So I'm a photographer, and sorry, I can't speak without my pictures. Therefore, my pictures are very important. I'm photographing since 20 years about Islam in Europe, and I can tell you my work cover the most of Europe, even Germany. And let me see from the beginning. If we speak about Muslims in Germany, I can't see difference between Muslims in Germany, UK, Scandinavia, Italy, Spain, or because the problems are more than less the same. But I will start with the first picture. It is about 2 Turkish minarets in Hamburg with a German flag. And the former Prime Minister, German Prime Minister Angela Merkel, told one day that Islam is a part of Germany. And this was a very famous speak from her. And from this day, there was a lot of discussion and history about these words, because most of Germans was disagree. They didn't want Islam as part of Germany. And some people mean not Islam, but the Muslims are part of Germany, and so on. But that is my question here. At 2 Turkish minarets and the Turkish with a German flag between, and that is not always like that. It was 2006 when the German was playing football in the World Champions. They have made this flag here, and I came and passing there, and I took this picture. Oh. Why not working? This picture is of the building of this mosque in Hamburg here, where they're writing the gable of the Turkish mosque, the German translation of the Quran here. And I will continue with this one is Imam Ali Mosque in Hamburg, one of the oldest mosques in Germany from the 1950s here. And this is one inside of the mosque, and this is the only mosque I have seen with an oval prayer hall. The prayer halls are mostly as a quadrat, but this is oval. And that is a minbar of the mosque. This is a Shia mosque, and made from Iranian people from the 60s. They came to Germany. This is Shaika Halima Krausen from Hamburg. She is Imam since 20 years for the German-spoken Muslim society in Hamburg. This new mosque is standing also in Hamburg, and it was a former church. It's changed to minaret. And that is looking. I haven't been in the mosque is ready now inside, but I haven't been there. But you can see the different ways how they built. That I found on a Muslim cemetery in Hamburg. You can find a Chinese Muslim beside an Iranian Muslim. And how the way of life is, people from all different countries living in Germany, Muslims, and they're also dying there. In Germany, you find very different groups and so on, and the Muslims are divided in different direction, theological, political, and nationalistic. And but I have been one day were together with this Naqshbandi people, and it was nice. This is Caroline Neumüller. She is very, no, she is living in not anymore in Bremen, but she was very, very engaged in of Syrian children, and she was also very involved in Islamic feminism. That is also one of the ideas you find here in Western Europe about feminism and Islam, the relationship between Islam and women, and so on. If you travel by train in Germany, you can find, for example, Münster at the railway station, this picture here, the mosque beside the railway station. Imams of the West, it is a project, research project from a professor in Copenhagen, where I'm living, Valdemar Winding. He made interviews of imams in Germany. I traveled together with him as photographer. And he is here in Osnabrück and interviews two students. They're studying Islam in Osnabrück. Typical Turkish mosque you will find everywhere in Germany. And let's look inside. One of the most modern mosques in Germany, it is in Colonia. It's also one of the biggest mosques with, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 people can come and pray. It is a modern mosque, and one of the most important mosques in North Rhine-Westphalia, also in Cologne area. And it just look like that. This picture is from 2019. I will speak later on it again. In Germany, you have the 3rd of October every year, Open Day Mosque. So more than 1,000 mosques have opened over the whole country, and invite the German people to come in and to listen to and discuss about Islam. These are some impressions of this new mosque. It is full of light. It is very, if you come to Cologne, I can recognize you. You should visit this. So this is for the shoes, where you can put in a box, and very, very organized. This one. This is the main entrance of the mosque, and they have, besides the mosque, they have even everything, shops and haircutter and so on. This is one German Muslim, one of the older, little bit my generation, I will say, Ayub Kohler. He was the former president of the Central Council of the Muslim in Germany, and his wife beside. But you find, if you travel through Germany, you find small mosques like this one from Albania. And how I told you, the mosques, the Muslims are divided in different. You have Albanian mosque, you have Turkish mosque, you have Pakistani mosque, Somali mosque, and so on, Arabic mosque. Yeah, and that is for me as a convert a quite big problem. It has always been a problem. I don't feel at home in these mosques. I have to tell that. You have also really a lot of initiative in Germany, like a Muslim women education center. And this is a Muslim theater group, and they some years ago they playing a parody about the topic integration by the German theater group Islamische Denkfabrik, means Islamic think tank, and they buy and stay well integrated. They speak about about the problems you have as Muslim in Germany. You are not very welcome in the society, and you are always outside here from the even the young generation, you know, and that is give challenges for the new Muslim generations to fit this one here. Yeah. This is one of the oldest mosques in Germany, in Aachen, my former hometown, by the way. And here, the minaret is even in the 50s, they tried to build a mosque in an European German way, not in a Turkish and Arabic way. That is other view. This is inside. And that is Friday khutbah. And that is the first imam of the mosque in Aachen, Bilal Mosque. This is Ayam Mojed, the first. This is the president of the Council of Muslims in Germany, and you have one organization, one for many others, but they don't cover all organizations. Some of them. Interesting is this kind of mosque because it was an old factory and not far away from where my hometown has been. And the old factory, it is changed to a mosque. It's look like that here. This is Abu Bakr Mosque in Frankfurt, and unfortunately, in the background, you know, and that you find often many times in Germany that the mosque is outside of the town. It is behind the other behind trees and so on, so nobody can see exactly what's going on. But inside is very beautiful made in this one. Mannheim, this mosque, the Turkish mosque was until 1995 the biggest mosque in Germany. And I met a little bit on the right side of the Bible. There is a church. This one here is beside. So they stay in not in contrast, but they stay in a dialogue between Christianity and Islam. And that is on Friday prayer. Normally the mosque on Fridays are full of people. That's look like here. Yeah, I would like to also to speak about a little bit what is about around in Islam in Germany, and here is a street named after Muhammad Iqbal, Sir Muhammad Iqbal. He was a founder of Pakistan. He lived in Germany 1907 for 1 year, and he read Goethe. And as Muhammad Iqbal lived here in Heidelberg, in this building here. I have this written here, and he read West East Divan from Goethe, and wrote after a poesy about the message from the East, and is an answer to Goethe. And if you read these two books, then you can really feel the West Eastern dialogue in a literal way. It's very beautiful, and that I have integrated in my project, Goethe and Iqbal. That is Berlin, and Berlin have one of the biggest minorities in Germany, mostly from Turkey, and some of the areas it is look like Istanbul, like this here, and this little mosque, and of course the most important mosque in Berlin, the Leipzig Mosque. It is built of the oldest cemetery, Muslim cemetery in Berlin, beside. That is the first mosque in Germany, built in 1924. It is an Ahmadiyya mosque, but anyway, it is a mosque, the first mosque in Germany. Let's look like inside here, and this is my friend Mutter Preuß for Berlin Muslim. In 2012, it was an exhibition in Berlin. I was a part of about the mosque architecture, how the mosque architecture should be in Germany. And there are some examples here from one Barcelona, from one architect, and so on. It was very interesting. Berlin has also other projects, the House of One, and this is the Muslim Kadir Sanchi. He is organizing to build a building for Jews, Christian, and Muslim together. And that is an imam from Berlin. I met him, and he is organizing a lot of things for the young people, Muslims, and he tried to explain about fanatism. Okay, you can be you like your football game, your football club, but that is not this fanatic you have to use in the society. But it is what I meant. Kreuzberg in Berlin. It's really look like Istanbul, and this is the Mevlana Mosque, by the way. And you have, of course, a lot of shops, and you have still small in Berlin prayer rooms. In English, you call it pop-up mosque, so you can put together and take out everywhere you want. And one of the imams is Achim Kumuz. He has the Stiftung Islam in Deutschland. He tried to establish Islam in Berlin and in Germany, of course. This is Freimann Mosque in Munich, one of the oldest mosques in Germany, and it is built from people from Bosnia, and I will speak a little bit later about the Bosnian Muslims. They're playing a very big role in Germany, this minority. And this is one of the most beautiful mosques in Germany. It is near Munich. And yes, in the minaret, you can read the azan, and that is seen by lights. You can see this one, because normally in Germany, it is not allowed to make azan by voice. So they make azan by light. And that is this mosque here, very beautiful made, and even a green mosque. It is they have solar panels to make their own electricity and warm water. Not all, but a part of this one. But you find this is a beautiful inside of this mosque here. And that is here, German are normally, I think, very open. If there is open day in the mosque, they come to listen to the Muslims. And it is very different. Normal people, I will tell you later on it again, the normal people or the media, what they're writing. There is so much different, you know. Within Quran. And this is the Imam of the mosque, Benjamin Idris, and he is from Bosnia. And this city, Penzberg, is a city with a lot of Bosnian people. And I think the Bosnian people came after the war to Germany for work. And here he's speaking with Waldemar Winding again about imams in the West. And you have here for the children Islam lessons. I will tell you how was the character of Muhammad, how was Muhammad to children, how was Muhammad to non-Muslims. Then looks Muhammad like, and so on. Question children normally like to ask. And you can find here the Bosnian family to the right, and on the left, the typical Bavarian lederhose short. You can see that is a picture you find in South Germany often. That in Pforzheim, and Turkish mosque, and that is what I will, the event, the Turkish event. And I have been together with them this day, but I didn't understood very much because I don't speak Turkish. And that is the problem. I feel that the Muslims are divided in nationalities and languages and so on. There is no really communication between Muslims. That is my problem. But it is one foreign worker, Gastarbeiter in Germany, you call it, is a typical person. He lived for 30 years in Pforzheim and now is in pension. We talk a little bit about East Germany, and in East Germany, they was never able to have Muslims there in the GDR time. But now there are some most established, some communities established in East Germany, but the life is not very easy for them, that I can tell you. But a little bit history. We want to speak about the Islamic resting place in Kleinbeuscha near Leipzig. There is a grave of a Tatar Muslim soldier from the Napoleon War. And near Leipzig, there was a very big battle. And Muslim Tatars from Poland, Lithuania, they fought both for the Napoleon part, but also on the Allied part, also Preußen and Russia and so on. And that grave is from 1813. Something more famous is this building in Dresden. This is not a mosque, this is a factory for tobacco. It is made in 1907 from a Jews. He had business, close business to Ottoman Empire, and bought tobacco to make cigarettes and cigars or something like that. Yes, I have to end my present in Granada. Muhammad Assad, the grave of Muhammad Assad, sorry, one of the most famous German Austrian Muslims converts. He came from Austria, lived in Germany, lived in United States, in Saudi Arabia. He was the first ambassador of Pakistan. and died in Granada. He translated the Quran in English. Very shortly, will show some my exhibitions in Germany, Islam in Europe. My first one in 2013 in Osnabrück. The most special exhibition was in a synagogue in Germany about unity unity in diversity. And I think this exhibition was so special because it was made in a synagogue in Erfurt in Germany. And the German visitors was very surprised and positive surprised about to find Islam exhibition in a synagogue. Even the German ZDF came to make an interview with me. As I told you, every year, the 3rd of October, and that is a very good idea to do this, to have an open day mosque. Every year they make this one, and that was in Cologne, where I made 2019 an exhibition. Very shortly, this is my book I have published 2020, Islamic Architecture in Europe, because I'm thinking in an European dimension. I can't see Germany isolate from the other part, because everything is one world in my mind. And this is my first page of the book. The starting and East and West are together, you know. And this is the example of a mosque in Lithuania. And last not least, this is the concept of my next book, Islam in Europe, Islamic Education and Muslim Daily Life. That will have 4 chapters about the philosophical aspect of Islam in Europe, the Islamic education in our public and private space. It will have a special chapter about Imam training in Germany, from Osnabrück, and last not least, an English chapter about the cultural challenges for Muslims living in Europe. That was all, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad, for your sharing. So I can see that in all parts of Germany, except for the Eastern Germany, there are a lot of mosques for the Muslim there, I believe so. And without wasting any time, we shall proceed to our Q&A session. So I have this one question here from Professor Dr. Dawood. He asked about how do you see the future of German Muslims? The German Muslim in the future. So I would like to have our respective panels to answer this question from Professor Dawood. We may start from Mr. Sulaiman, I think.
Yes, I keep myself short also for the general information. I have to get out of the conference at 11:15. So it's another half an hour before I have to leave. Unfortunately, this is some other appointments. It's a very generalized question. I think it's very difficult to answer it as such, because nowadays we have 5.2 million Muslims since the influx of mainly Syrians coming in and after 2000. So I obviously can't speak for them. I obviously can't speak for the developments in Germany, given that we have are now basically, after 2 years of pandemics, are now again in a kind of a state of emergency here. So it's a very fluid situation. I think to put out, take 2 aspects as one, we have an enormously dynamic, positive and diverse young generation, which is very eager, but which is also leaving the old ethno-political definitions of the previous decades, and I really want to leave that behind them. And I think they will go for other forms of existence, of being a Muslim in Germany, being a German Muslim. And we see new models. Not everything will be positively, because I think we will also have trends which could be of a very high individualization and deconstructing community as a possibility, which is also a trend of postmodern discourses having been introduced into the intra-Muslim discourse. So I see there are chances, but I see also dangers that leave a certain cohesion, but that the future will tell. But I'm regularly quite positive. And I also see a positive change inside the German society, because if you compare the mood, let's say past 2015, there has been made change in Germany. Obviously, there is a hardcore of negativity towards Muslims, but the general atmosphere has actually been better than before. And it has changed also because even the hardest or even the most hawkish anti-Muslim voice realize now that Germans and Europeans have far bigger problems than the Muslim communities could possibly theoretically ever be. I mean, we had the pandemics and related economic crisis. We have the war, which are looming depression or inflation in Germany and Europe. So I think many people see it as don't see any more Muslims as a main enemy. And I think that is a good thing. And also there is a much higher visibility of Muslims in society. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic, but also cautiously because crisis points in history always can bring also moments of, let's say, tension. So we have to be watchful. We have to do our homework. See, I don't like victim discourses. I don't like the Muslim self-victimization, which is so prevalent and so negative in the West. We have to do our homework. We have to prepare ourselves. Muslims did, for example, very spontaneously open their mosques for Ukrainian refugees, which is, I think, a very good thing, because when you help others, you see also existentially you're protected by Allah. I think this is a good sign, but we have to do our homework. We have to come together. We have to unify on certain issues, and but this is a work being done, and let's say what happens. But I mean, I can't tell you what happens in a year. I mean, everything is with Allah. Thank you.
Sharifa, can I ask one question?
Sure. You may proceed with the question.
Okay, related to what? Okay, let me first of all thank our presenters. Alhamdulillah, we benefited a lot, and several things that were highlighted by our presenters really reached us, and all these things are very good. But just want to ask one question as a response to what our brother Dr. Stephen said. Is there any manifestation of Islamophobia in Germany? We can see in France, we can see in UK, but Germany may be different.
We can see it in India too. We can see it all over the world. I mean, it's just not. It's not necessarily a Western issue. You also have it in, as I say, in India, for example, or not to speak about Myanmar and other places.
True.
Yes, of course it is. Yes, of course it is. There is a certain manifestation, as there is a certain manifestation of anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
There is a percentage of XYZ people who have a resentment against Muslims. There are certain medias who are stoking it. There is certain political groups, like we have a right-wing group in Germany called AfD, but they are declining actually. You could say the parliamentarian expression of Islamophobia has declined in the past years, because during the pandemic, people realized, you see, these people are very good on single issues. They're not really bettering this society. Obviously, you have a certain amount of hate crimes. They declined in the past 2 years. The peak is behind us. And also, I think Muslim. You see, the point is, you see, I'm not denying. You see, because I know if I were in the certain academic circles, I mean, people would now say, no, you're centrist and you're white man and you have your privileges and you don't know anything. I'm very well aware of my own privilege status, and I know that there is a certain reality. But my point is not the denying Islamophobia or to downplay it. My point is Islamophobia or anti-Muslim resentment, which, by the way, is already spoken about in Quran, because it's a certain anthropological concept. There will always be people who really hate Allah and who hate the Deen and hate the Muslims. So that's also a fact of life. But I'm not denying its existence. But what I'm saying is, it
How
cannot.
do you respond to such situation?
Let me just finish my sentence, because
Okay.
it cannot be in the center of our existence.
Mm.
See, there need to be some firewalls. Yes, we need to fight it, like CARE does in America, for example. We need to work against it. We need to also mobilize it, and we need to mobilize societies, and we do everything what we need to do as communities and of citizens to combat it. I'm all for it. And by the way, a lot of people who are analytical, academically analyzing is not very active in combating it practically. But I say Muslims cannot make it the core of their existence, because then it will influence their, let's say, they are unseen, and they become, they start to live a life of resentment. You see, we have to separate these issues from issues of our core existence. You see, it's a reality, and we have to face it, but it cannot define us as Muslims. Because if we do it, and there are trends already, especially in Western young academic circles, you see, where the definition of what a Muslim is has veered enormously away of the traditional definition. The traditional definition was given by Mr. Rieger. You see the famous Hadith Jibril, when Jibril came to us, and so on and so forth. And nowadays, a lot of Muslims taking over postmodern definitions. Muslims, and they have a new term, as read as Muslims, are people who are victimized by society. And that cannot be a definition of our own being. So we have to separate, we have to accept there is an outer reality, we have to do our work against it, and we have to mobilize others for it, but we cannot let it into our own being. That's my answer to it.
Yes. Just now you said postmodern definition of Islam. Can you highlight what is meant by postmodern definition of Islam?
Just go to Berkeley, just go to the American discourses on Muslim existence, just go to who are the main intellectual influences. You see, like Foucault, the French postmodernists, have been defined by Berkeley, the discourse of Islamophobia, which has never been anchored to any kind of Muslim Islamic analysis, but is taken completely from, let's say, from late 20th century, early 21st century political or sociological discourses. See?
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor, for your response.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sulaiman, for the answers, and Prof. Tamim for the questions. So we may proceed with the second question from Brother Shihab. So I may ask Mr. Abu Bakar Regis to answer this question. The questions sound like this: the most dangerous disease within Muslim community is religious division. So is there any manifestations of these divisions within the German Muslim community? So Mr. Abu Bakar, you may answer.
Thank you very much for this question. I would say yes. I mean, there always has been a kind of division in the German community of Muslims because of the background, immigration background of the Muslims involved. So we have Muslims from Arab world, from Turkey, from other parts of the world, and they have for a long time, in a sense, been very kind of marked by their kind of background, the countries they basically came from. I think this is now dramatically changing in the young generation, because the young generation is living in Germany. In fact, I think something like a unification between them is much more in the reach, much more possible. At least I hope so. And I would circle around of the whole question of language, as I mentioned before. I mean, whoever speaks German, wells German, I mean, in one way or the other belongs together, because we can communicate, we can raise debates and so on. So I think language is a key issue. And as a matter of fact, there's now a young generation of Muslims of Germany. Like, for instance, I have 5 children, and many other of my friends, like which have, let's say, Turkish or Arab immigration background. If all our children meet, I mean, you will hardly be able to differentiate who is German, who has any kind of background, because they're all, in a sense, German, because they all speak German languages. So my hope is there will be much more possibilities for unifying. Not in the sense that everybody is the same. I mean, people will have different views, different background, and so on. And Islam and the Deen is quite wide. I mean, not everybody has to be uniformed in one way. And so my whole expectations in that sense are positive. I think we will grow in expertise because all these young people we have will be very well educated. I think we will grow in significance because, as I try to indicate, we have something to offer for the debate. Even politically, I think, I believe, like, for instance, one of our very positive and points is we are Europeans in terms of we defend Europe, the idea of the European Union, against anyone who tries to bring back the old form of nationalism. So that, I think, is a very important political aim of the Muslims of Europe. I think we want to contribute to a unified Europe, up to the point that I think we should be a bit more present in the European Parliament also. I think would be natural because we are Europeans, we are connected all over Europe, we defend Europe, we believe in European civilization, we believe in European culture. So quite naturally, I think we are defenders of the idea of a gathered and unified Europe, inshallah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Abubakar. So we have another question here. So I would like Mr. Ahmed to answer this question. It's a very interesting question from Brother Ikmal Hadi. So he says that, what are the common views of German Muslims on the Russia and Ukraine conflict? Do they side with the NATO because Germany is a member of NATO, or they side with the Russians? Mr. Ahmad, you may answer this question.
Maybe Sister Sharifa, if I may interfere, this is not related to the scope of the topic, you know. So I think this is out of the topic. So I think it's better not to interfere. Yeah, not to answer this question. So our main focus here is about Muslim unity. So we don't want to create problems, but we are trying to solve the problems. So maybe if maybe the question might be like, as it was mentioned by the 3 speakers, when I look at the, I mean, what should be done more about the unity of the Muslims in Germany, regardless of their ethnicities. Because when I look at the ethnicities that they come from different backgrounds, and based on what Brother Ahmed has presented, the many photos related to different mosques that were built by different Muslims who come from different backgrounds, ethnicities, and even that was mentioned, like even we, let's say, in the same country, you face that kind of, I mean, diversity, if we said that. Maybe we can say diversity. Maybe that could be something normal, but what could be done, let's say, to bring us closer? That would be another. And what was mentioned by Brother Abu Bakr, I think that is very interesting, that when I look at the role of language. Now, my question would be like, when you look at maybe Brother Ahmed, one mosque, if we look at it at the narrative of that mosque, we can have one separate article or one separate book, because that reflects one particular issue by itself. So maybe that could be more on that. Brother Ahmed has done a great job compiling all this, and this is very important for us, you know. But I can say that if you identify different communities, what will be, I mean, your role, let's say later, perhaps you can provide this material to those who are able to narrate and to provide more information about outside, maybe not only Muslims in Germany, but outside Germany. And another thing that when I would like to ask, since both Brother Suleiman and Abu Bakr, they are dealing with Islamic newspaper. So now the language of the newspaper, is it in German language, or do you facilitate other minorities, let's say, or that is meant like what you mentioned, the young generation, your focus is more towards the young Muslim generation? And what are the, you mentioned many issues, but what would be the most important issues that to attract the Muslims towards the unity? So maybe that would be something, let's say, related to our topic, since we are talking about the unity of the Muslims in Germany. I mean, over all the world, but this is very specific to the German community, Muslim community per se. Thank you very much.
Who do you address, Mr. Riga or me? So it's...
I mean, anyone, if you'd like to, any one of you, I mean, since you're related to the newspaper.
Maybe just a very brief contribution before Mr. Ahmed will maybe give us some insights. I mean,
yes, please. Yes, please.
I think because just it comes in my mind. I mean, one is, I mean, language, obviously, because Islamische Zeitung is published in German, and whoever speaks German will, in one way or the other, be involved in our debates and will benefit from the newspaper. So language, I think, is of key importance, because everybody who is young in Germany speaks very good German. I think there is a possibility of unity. But the other thing I want to highlight, and then also ask myself a question to Sidi Ahmed, I think also infrastructure is something which can unify. And for instance, we have now mosques, I mean, great, wonderful mosques. And if you go into the mosque, of course, there is a situation coming up of more people than just one ethnic group will meet there, because the mosque in itself is like a call for unification. But I would also, and that is my point, I would also raise the awareness that in Islam, there are lots of institutions which in fact unify people. For instance, think on the marketplace. As you remember, the Prophet Muhammad has established a mosque, but he has also established a marketplace. And the marketplace by itself unifies people from all kinds of backgrounds, even non-Muslims, could be everybody. So the whole idea of the awqaf, for instance, is to contribute to the society. And it doesn't matter if the society is Muslim or not even. And so this is also an institution which unifies. So I think if we are not unified, and we may consider that maybe is because, I mean, we are so much politicized that we think in terms of political doctrines, ideologies, rather than offering to us and others and institutions and an infrastructure which is really unifying people. So Sidi Ahmed, I'm sure, has been all over Europe and has visited many, many great Muslim towns, really. And I'm sure he will confirm that in all of these towns, there was not just a mosque, there was always the marketplace, there was always the awqaf, there was always the hospital. I mean, there was a whole infrastructure which was unifying people. So my point is, I think we have to lead our inspiration away from being too much involved in political doctrines rather in social services, because social service, social contribution to the society will unify people and also will unify non-Muslims. Because, I mean, in the end of the day, I mean, one of the winners in Germany, if you think about it, one institution which brought everybody together in Germany was the kebab. You know, the famous Turkish dish. You know, you see right-wingers, yeah. You see right-wingers, yeah, queuing up in Berlin to get one of these wonderful, tasteful doner kebabs. You know? If you go to Germany, I mean, all these wonderful restaurants. If you go into it, Muslim restaurants, you see everybody eating there. So I think we have to bring in an infrastructure also, which is in itself a unification. And I think Islam has a tremendous model to offer on that side.
I would like to add some ideas, my 2
please.
points, please, if it's possible. So first one is the mosque architecture in Europe or in Germany. And unfortunately, I can't show you my famous mosque in Europe, because the famous mosque in Europe is standing in Stockholm in Sweden. And that explains how Islamic architecture can add to the local architecture beside a church, you know, in the same way, you know. That is my model of how to be a mosque in the local society here in Europe. We have to give up the idea of a Turkish mosque, Arabic mosque, Pakistani mosque, Indian mosque, and so on. If you go to England, so most of mosques look like like Pakistani, Bangladeshi. You know, if you go to France, the mosques look like Moroccan, Tunisian, and in Germany they look like Turkish. We have to give up this idea. You know, this is the first one. Sorry, if I'm Muslim, if I come in Germany or in Denmark in a mosque, I feel like stranger. Why? Because they don't speak my language. Okay, and this is the second point I would like to speak. We have to learn to speak in the local language that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have done also. You know, and so the second point is the imam training. And one model you will find at the moment in Germany, in Osnabrück, where they have established an imam training center. In German, not in Turkish, in Pakistani, in Urdu, so in German, of course, Arabic, some second language for Quran and so on, you know. And because imam in Germany have to speak German, he have to know the cultural, historical background of the people, and so on. It's so much. It is impossible to import the imams from Turkey, from Saudi Arabia, from Afghanistan. They don't have any idea how the life is in Germany, you know? And if we get these 2 points resolved, I think that is my view of future. How Muslims can be established and will be respected in Western Europe. Of course, the other side make a lot of mess in newspapers and Islamophobia you find in Germany, and hate, and they hit people in the train, in the streets, and so on. But on the other way, you have also the part of Muslims. They have to work on this one, to give up this, to thinking in nationality, in language, and in culture, because the Turkish culture, Islam is much more than Turkish culture. Sorry for that. You know, Islam is so much things, you know, and not only Turkish. And that I have found out in my traveling, because I was traveling in Europe, but I also was traveling in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in India, in Pakistan, in Morocco, in Egypt, Sudan, Kenya, and so on. I have seen the diversity of Islam, and how people interpret Islam in this cultural background. So if they do that, I can do in the same way, then I can interpret Islam in my German European context. And that is what we Muslims have, many Muslims have a problem with, you know, because you have the different theological entrance to Islam from Muslims. And diversity, it is okay for me, but I feel very quite alone in my option of Islam. You know, even here in Denmark, in Copenhagen, I left the Muslim community. I left it, you know, because I don't have any more a connection with these people, because they're living in a completely other world. And that I find out if I just have been in England, in UK, you have the same problem. But I have the way of life where I can hide myself, my camera, and make the pictures about Islam in Europe, and go home and can make a documentary about that one, you know. And that I get happy about this one, you know. And I have seen the same problems in England, and I can see the problem here in Scandinavia, in Denmark, in Sweden, and so on. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Ahmed, for the sharing. It's good. It's a good thing that we can see that those diversity, how these infrastructures, mosques could may separate and unite us as a Muslim. Okay. Next, we have this one more question from Sister Nurul Hikmah. If I may see, the question sounds, despite the fact that Islam is a harmonious and peace religion, Islamophobia in Germany is becoming more prevalent in the Western society, especially after 9/11 tragedy. How do you suppose Islamic da'wah in Germany can be developed, and how does a Muslim that overcome all aspects that portrays negativity about Islam? So if any of the panel can answer this question.
Maybe just, first of all, I have also to excuse myself after 11:15. I have to leave because of some engagement on a court. Just taking on the question, I mean, I think we have to be honest. I mean, we always clarify, I mean, there's millions of Muslims in Germany and Europe, and not all of them are angels. Not all of them are wonderful. Not all of them are heroes. Not all of them are, I mean, we are human beings. No? So undoubtedly, we had a problem in Europe. There were something like Muslim terrorists. There were Muslim ideologists. There were Muslim thieves. There were Muslim criminals. I mean, we have everything. Yeah. And the only thing we have to point out, and we did point out, is there's nothing like Islamic terrorism. There's nothing like Islamic theft. There's no Islamic bank robbery. There's no Islamic criminality. But there are criminals. There are thieves. There are all this kind of thing. So we have to be honest. And on that basis, we have also to clarify the majority of the Muslims of Germany have good intentions. Yeah, the majority of the Muslims in Europe have good intentions. We don't want to harm anyone. We want to contribute to society. We are not in any form of enemyship to any of the governments of Europe. In contrary, I mean, we want to contribute. We want to help. We want to be part of it. And I think with that very positive approach, I believe we can change things. I mean, we can also make Islam and the Muslim presence much more attractive because we have also very strong points. We have social competence, for instance. I mean, whoever joins a mosque will not be lonely. Whoever meets Muslim will not miss a meal. Whoever joins Muslims will get a tea. Whoever, you know, visit Muslims will have a surprise in one way or the other. So I think, as Suleiman Wilms pointed already out, I mean, our approach has to be extremely positive. And we have to try to reach into the society. We have to open the doors of our mosques, and we have to meet people on the road and just talk about our narrative of Islam. And also, I mean, we have to fight against the idea that you can summarize the presence of Islam, or you can summarize Islam with a kind of flood of information. I mean, you have to talk to people to understand what Islam is. You have to talk to our intellectuals, to our scholars, to the normal Muslim on the road, to understand Islam better. And I think in the middle or long term, I mean, we will succeed in Europe because our belief in Allah and our knowledge about Allah is of a tremendous positivity. You know? It will destroy any negative approach. So in that sense, I'm extremely positive and optimistic, and I see all the difficulties, but my hope is stronger. So,
Inshallah, it's true. Okay, so I believe Mr. Abu Bakr answered the question from this Sister Nurullah Hikmah. So, so we end with the question and answer session, and let's proceed for our last session with Dr. Fatme to conclude this conference today. Please, sir, the floor is all yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much, Sister Sharifa, for moderating this session. And first of all, I would like to thank our great speakers here who presented in a wonderful way. And this is a place where we are learning and we are dealing with the academia. And the most important thing that the three speakers were focusing, they presented to us, if I may say that we look at it from the three different perspectives. So we had the historical background that was presented by Brother Suleiman, where he started from the very beginning, how Islam was introduced at the early stage and became famous during the time, and he expressed in their own point of views when they attached themselves to Islam. And he was very much particular about not only looking at Germany per se, but he looked at Europe as such. And we could see that there is no much difference between Muslims in Germany, maybe only ethnicity that we create will make a difference. So I look at it from the historical background, what he mentioned, and these are, what I summarize. When we come to Brother Abu Bakr, he was very much specific, focusing on a great personality that we are known. But I was very impressed by the way he explained in a deep, by looking at it from a very deep perspective, and comparing that with his ideas and how related this to Islam. So that is very important, and that makes us to understand locality as well, because as they mentioned, they belong to that region, they belong to that nation, they belong to that kind of people. Then we have great personalities who might differ from us when you look at the Aqidah per se, or the way of life that we follow. But when we look at the way he presents, especially these 6 elements that he mentioned, and how he compared to Islam, I think this is a great contribution that we can benefit, and this will help our students here to have, to ponder about this. So this is what we can learn from this presentation that was presented by Brother Abu Bakr. And when you look at the last speaker, that was Brother Ahmed, and he made us travel around that region through different pictures, starting with Germany, in many places in Germany, looking at different masajid, the way how the Muslims portrayed Islam there, and the way they designed the masjid, reflecting this diversity that we have within the Muslim community itself. And I believe that diversity, we come from different backgrounds, is not a problem. The problem might be the way if we interpret Islam according to this diversity, that we create a problem, because that is a part of the nature how Allah created us. So this is a wonderful session that we, even though we were not traveling physically, but through these pictures, I followed Brother Ahmed as if I was traveling with him and looking at the content. That is a great contribution. So may Allah bless all of you for what you have given to us. And this is, what we are looking for. And this is a long time that we are waiting for this kind of forum to take place. And alhamdulillah, today we managed to make this with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the grace and the blessings of Allah. We managed to have this for real, alhamdulillah, And of course, this will not be the last conference that we are going to have with you, since we came to know you. So we are going to think about other topics, how to contribute to our community here in Malaysia, and how this will serve as a bridge to link, or to link between Muslims in Germany and Muslims in this region. So I believe this is very important for us, So when you look at it from that perspective, from the International Islamic University point of view, and this center that we are dealing with, it is a part of the mission and the vision of the university, that is uniting the Muslim Ummah. So that is our aim here. And what we have mentioned here, these are very important information that will help the Muslims in this part of the world. Perhaps we can say they can improve themselves. They can make better when they look at this example that you presented to us. In Germany is not easy like in Malaysia, where we have Muslims living here. In Germany, we are not, Muslims are not those who are leading, but we look at the challenge that you face and the opportunities, how to cope up, how to build the future. So this will benefit us, And another important thing here is that how we are going to build this relationships between us, Muslims in this region and Muslims there. So that will help us to support each other. And we can opt for having even writings about that. That will be great, that our students can write about these issues and how to compare with the Muslims here. Because sometimes we see that we take things for granted when Muslims are, leading. So sometimes we don't pay attention to small problems that we create a distraction, you see, when you look at the future or in the current situation. So these are, as I mentioned to you, that these are very important things that I think the audience learned and we learned as well. And before we end, I would like to thank, those who contributed and helped us very much to make this forum the way it is, So may Allah bless all of them and of course make them happy in both dunya and akhirah, inshallah. So on behalf of the Institute, International Institute for Muslim Unity, so I would like to thank you very much for making this event happen, as well as contributing a lot for providing this wonderful information. May Allah bless all of you. Thank you very much. So I hand over to Sister Sharifa to close.
Jazakallah khair.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fatma, for the closing remarks on today's conference. So I believe all of us gaining a lot of information from the sharing from these three speakers, all the way from Germany. Thank you very much, Stephen, Sir Andreas, and Sir Eckert, for your sharing about this Muslim in Germany. So I believe it is a great knowledge for us today. So thank you for spending your time
Thank
and
you.
sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much.
And we hope to see you again, inshallah, if we are
Inshallah.
talking or
Okay.
making a conference, inshallah. Thank
Thank you
you
very much.
and have a
Inshallah.
great day, everyone.
Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Assalamu
Thank
alaikum.
Fi amanillah,
Nice
fi
to meet
amanillah.
you.
Alaikum.
Nice to meet you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.